Hello and welcome back to Lost in Science. Maybe your favourite science show every week on the radio where you get all your science goodies, or maybe not. We'll find out. I'm Stu, and on the show with me this week I have Claire. How are you going, Claire?
Hello, Stu. Hey, let's change some hearts and minds about their favourite science radio show this week, shall we?
Absolutely. Let's fill them up with science.
Just those hearts and minds that Lost in Science isn't currently their favourite, not the other way around.
Well, yeah. If it's already your favourite, rest easy. It'll stay your favourite. But if it's not, stay tuned. Anyway,
yeah.
Science. What have you got for us, Claire?
Well, Stu, this week, I mean, you know I love a great ape story. I just can't go past a story about our wonderful cousins, the chimpanzees. And there's a bit of chimpanzee news and research that's come out in the last couple of months. One article has come out in the last week from researchers from Western Australia, and another research article was in the journal Science in like a couple of months ago. Now, the reason I'm talking about these two research articles is one, I believe, represents the goodness of humanity, and one I think represents, or what would you say, like of primate kind. And one I would say represents the worst of humanity and primate kind. So I'm going to be talking about these new discoveries of what chimpanzees get up to and how similar it is to some of the awful things that humans get up to, and then the discoveries of the awesome things that chimpanzees have been getting up to, and how that is related to the great things that we do. Small spoiler alert. One's to do with civil unrest, and the other is to do with weather predictions.
Wow.
Anyway, yeah, that's my tease. Weather predicting chimps. And yeah, I mean we all knew chimpanzees had it in them to fight each other. But anyway, that's what I'll be talking about today. The good, the bad, and the ugly of the chimpanzee/human world.
Wow, that sounds really cool. I mean, the chimps are interesting. They're no bonobos, but...
They're no bonobos. No bow.
But interesting stuff. And obviously,
yeah,
our nearest relatives in a way.
Our dearest.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. How about you, Stu? What have you got to blow our socks off with today?
I come across... in discussions about science and science-related topics, and people use arguments that are not very well based in logic. And one of those is what is called the appeal to nature fallacy, which comes up a fair bit, and it's based on the idea that if something's natural, it's a good thing. If something's not natural, it's bad. If it's made by humans, it can't be a good thing. And I found an interesting discovery about nuclear fission.
Oh.
So we think, amazing breakthrough in human technology and science of the 20th century was the ability to harness the power of the atom and and make energy and bombs and other things using nuclear fission. But it's been around a little bit longer than that on Earth. And that's what I'm going to be talking about.
Certainly on the sun, right?
Well, that's fusion, which is we're still
that's
struggling.
Fusion, of course.
Still struggling with fusion.
Yeah.
Haven't worked that one out. I mean, great if we could solve a lot of problems. Yeah. But hey, we've already got a giant fusion reactor that we can use to power things. Do we really need?
Do we need another one?
Do we need one down the street? I don't know. Maybe. But yeah, I'll be talking a bit about nuclear fission and some discoveries from the 20th century, but suggesting that, hey, things just happen by themselves sometimes, and it's interesting to observe them. So yes, that is coming up later in the show, so please stay tuned.
I love a good ape story. And anyone who's followed along with primatologists over the years would know that chimpanzees is our closest relative. They do, if you look, you don't even have to look that deep, but they tend to show us both the best and the worst of ourselves in their actions, in their behaviors. They're not the purely love matriarchal society of the bonobos, are they?
No.
They can get pretty rough. And
they
fighty,
they don't
bitey,
scratchy,
cannibalistic,
ripping arms offy.
Yeah. Rippy arms offy, I think is the technical term. Yeah. And never so much more than in these two recently published journal articles that describe two very different chimp behaviours that I wanted to put side by side today because they've been published just within a few months of each other. And I really think they show the best and the worst of the best and the worst of I think human nature or how we are similar to our primate cousins. So one shows war, division, violence between neighbours, and the other one hits at planning, prediction, foresight, adaptability, and a love of creature comforts, which, is a human thing. So, it's two sides of a coin, Stu, today on Lost in Chimp Science. So, let's jump in.
The duality of chimpanzee kind.
Yeah. We're literally going from Chimpan A to chimpanzee here today on Lost in Science. The first article I want to talk about, this is researchers who have come to the conclusion that they have borne witness to a behaviour that they've never seen before. It is the first chimpanzee civil war. Never before has there been a documented chimpanzee civil war where there's been a harmonious group, have split apart and started to become enemies. So this has been a long-term study of the Ngogo chimpanzees in Kibale National Park in Uganda. And the observations of the researcher, they span around 30 years. This is one of the best studied chimpanzee communities on the planet. And this group has been incredibly stable for the 30 years that the researchers have been observing them. So that's from 1995 to 2015. And then something happened, something shifted. By 2018, this group split into two factions. There was a Western group and a Central group. And the primatologist who noticed this, Aaron Sandell, he started noticing things like chimps acting nervous around very familiar group members. There was grimacing. There was an increase in things like reassurance touching between the chimps. And they started changing their behavior to one another. They were behaving like they were not the family that they had been, but that they were strangers. And looking at this, compared to looking at this, knowing what's happened, in hindsight, the researchers are suggesting this was the beginning of what they can describe as the chimpanzee civil war that then happened.
They didn't really identify at the time that it was going to lead to such a big conflict, but they did note changes in their behaviour, and they've traced it back to that. Yeah. To those initial changes. Yep. Yeah, right.
Because it's such a well-studied group, they obviously take incredibly detailed notes of what's going on in the group, so they can trace it back and be like, oh, actually, this is what happened at that time. So the conflict happened over 7 years, this deterioration between the two groups, and what they saw were these 24 coordinated attacks between the two groups. It resulted in about 7 adult males being killed, 17 infants being killed, you might be thinking, okay, well, chimpanzees are known to be, can be violent, and they are known to attack outsiders, but this is the first time that this sort of coordinated attacks and violence has been seen in a unified family group. So that's why they're like, okay, this is why they're calling it a chimpanzee civil war.
Yeah.
And what they're sort of putting it down to is the breakdown of social structure. So a death of older key individuals at a time created sort of like a lack of trust between and a weakening of social bonds between the younger members of the group. There was a bit of leadership instability. Potentially there was a disease outbreak that happened in 2017 could have put external pressure on it as well. But really they're thinking, the glue that held the group together started to weaken, and then what happened after that was a polarization, and then these groups sort of turning on each other. So once the Central and the Western group turned on each other, the Western group actually, they started to, I guess, get one up on the Central group. So they benefited from the situation, and their rivals were weakened. So the Western group came out victorious in this civil war. But it's pretty icky. It echoes all types of tropes and bad human parallels. And yeah, it just goes to show that, we're not the only species capable of this type of internal conflict and turning on each other on a dime over a long period of time. And also, like, the reasons for the instability, they seem to me to feel pretty similar to the reasons that human groups become unstable as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, you lose trusted, reliable leadership, and that creates a power vacuum, which then gets taken up by whoever's hanging around, really.
Yeah. Now, they estimate that this could happen. This is a pretty rare event, this sort of like civil war, but with human impacts, it increases the likelihood. So climate change, deforestation, disease, all that sort of stuff disrupts the social cohesion, and also goes to show that when you're thinking about conservation of endangered species and protected species, it's not just about numbers, but it's also about social stability, especially when you're thinking about a species such as the chimpanzees. So there you go. That's the bad. That's the pretty rough side of the coin, and in comparison to humans. Now, I also want to spend a few minutes looking at the good side. And this is some research published by Western Australian researchers. It was published in Current Biology this week. And it's a study of eastern chimpanzees and their nest building behaviour. So these researchers, they wanted to work out how chimpanzees decided what type of nest they were going to build. Because chimpanzees can build, they have to do it every night. So they might decide to build nests that are higher in a tree, that are lower, that have different types, like different depths of foliage and leaves and all these sorts of different things. So they wanted to look at whether the weather had any impact on how they built their nests. So the researchers studied temperature, humidity, wind and rain, and they compared the conditions at the time of building their nest. And then they looked at how those conditions sort of tracked overnight. And what they found that the chimps did was the chimps chose warmer, less windy spots. Great. That's a smart choice, chimpanzees. Good job. They built thicker and deeper nests when it was colder and it was wetter. So that also checks out. Great. And then before rainy nights, they selected taller trees with denser canopy cover. But what was really interesting about these findings was their decisions matched the overnight conditions. So what the weather was like during the night, better than the conditions when they were actually building the nest.
So they must have been able to predict what the weather was going to be like.
Yeah, so this is not just necessarily reacting to the conditions right in front of you, but potentially anticipating future conditions. So yeah, every chimpanzee could potentially also be a
chimp meteorologists. We've got chimp meteorologists. Yeah.
chimp meteorologist.
I'm looking forward to the day when they get on TV and we have chimps presenting the weather. That'll be fantastic.
I know, wouldn't that be incredible? Yeah, so this is obviously not like total proof of this idea of planning, but it is a strong hint and a strong case for this sort of like cognitive sophistication. I don't know what's going on with the chimps, what they're looking at, how they're telling what the weather's going to be, but, problem solving and this foresight and using tools to make predictions about future environmental states. I mean, it's more than I can say for me on a good day when or a bad day or a day in Melbourne. Let's just say it. So there you go. 2 stories about chimpanzees. One of incredible violence and one of incredible foresight and intelligence and adaptability. We just like chimpanzees and chimpanzees just like us, we contain multitudes.
The intelligence might be the cause of both of those things. That's what we've got to ponder that.
Yeah, that's right.
Across Australia on the Community Radio Network, you're listening to Lost in Science.
A common rhetorical ploy that comes up in discussions of many science-adjacent topics is the appeal to nature fallacy, which holds that naturally occurring things are good and things that don't occur naturally are not to be trusted. And this comes...
Right. And does this sort of come down to like all chemicals are bad? Is that part of it, or is that something different?
Often that is where it comes, a chemical being used as a pesticide or as a food additive, and also in discussions about things like genetic modification and other novel technologies. It's like, well, it's unnatural, It's like, okay, well, that's not a very good basis for things. The idea that if something is naturally occurring, it's somehow safe, is obviously not based on a logical premise.
No. Just ask any venomous snake.
That's right. Nor that things that are synthetic are somehow automatically dangerous. That's an equally poor concept. Now, examples of naturally occurring toxic substances are easy to find. Apple seeds, for example, contain amygdalin, a substance which releases toxic hydrogen cyanide when crushed, but in an amount so tiny, if you bite on an apple pip, it's not going to kill you. We're talking about minuscule amounts. But if people did believe that naturally occurring things are safe and fine to use, they should be on board with nuclear fission reactors. because there is evidence that this has happened naturally in the history of this planet. So a fission reactor is one which uses extremely heavy elements, uranium, which has very large atoms that can be split by adding neutrons to their nucleus, which releases energy. The atom breaks down, it gets releases energy. The energy we can use to generate electricity, which is basically boiling water. Let's be honest, that's what nuclear reactors are, is big steam kettles. The steam drives turbines, which generates power. There's also industrial and medical applications for nuclear reactors as well. And following the Second World War, many countries began building reactors, despite the shortcomings of radioactive waste and possible meltdowns. They're still operating all over the world. Now, in 1956, a Japanese-born physicist who had moved to the US wrote a paper in which he hypothesized that conditions could arise naturally in uranium deposits in the ground that would allow sustainable nuclear fission reactions to occur.
This was just theorized, was it?
This was just a hypothesis in 1956. He thought that if the conditions were right, the uranium concentration must be high enough, arranged in a layer at least 650 millimeters in a shape that would allow fission in uranium-238 and induce fission in uranium-235. So they're two different isotopes of uranium. You need both of them or it wouldn't happen.
Yeah.
There also needs to be a moderator, like water, to slow down neutrons produced by the fission reactions, and there needs to be a significant amount of neutron-absorbing elements. And in reactors, they use things like silver and boron and other elements to absorb the neutrons, and that slows down the reactions further. And it keeps them stable and keeps them sustainable. Now, the relative proportions of existing uranium-238 and uranium-235 isotopes are pretty much the same all over the Earth. So in current deposits of uranium, they're at the wrong portions. It's not going to happen now. It's not possible for it to happen spontaneously for a nuclear reaction to start happening. But over geological timescales, the relative proportions of uranium isotopes have changed. So uranium-235 decays to other elements faster than uranium-238. So its concentration has been dropping faster than the 238. 2 billion years ago, there would have been a similar concentration of uranium-235 in uranium ore as what they use in modern nuclear reactors, a bit over 3.5%. So natural fission could have taken place if those other conditions were met. Theoretically, hypothetically.
Right. Okay.
Now, in 1972, some French scientists were alarmed to find that uranium ore samples from a mine in Gabon had much lower concentrations of uranium-235 than they should have found. And because you can use uranium-235 to make nuclear weapons, they thought maybe someone had stolen some of their uranium-235 to do something nefarious with. So they were quite concerned. Now, further investigation revealed evidence of a natural nuclear fission reaction at Oklo, which is in one of their uranium mines in Gabon.
Wow.
And then they found another 15 reaction sites in the same area. So where they were mining uranium, they found there had been 15 or 16 total nuclear reactors that had naturally started spontaneously operating 2 billion years ago.
And so what did that look like?
So basically they just found evidence of kind of the formations of the ore and things like that. There was distinct shapes they were finding, and they're going, that's clearly there's been a nuclear reaction here, and they could tell by looking at it. They also found a 17th location about 30 kilometers to the southeast at a place called Bangombe, but luckily they found that last reactor site, because all of the other sites, you know what they did? They dug them up to use the uranium. So all 16 sites that they originally found, they've just used them. They've just dug them up, used the uranium in French nuclear reactors and just used it all. So they didn't actually think, maybe we should study this and find out information. Hopefully what remains at Bangombe, which is the one that hasn't been fully mined, will be accessible to study without being used up as fuel just to power people's microwave ovens and TV sets. But one of the questions people might have is, if uranium-235 started out at a higher level and has been dropping ever since in proportion to uranium-238, why did the reactors only start 2 billion years ago and not earlier when there was a higher concentration of uranium-235? And the answer is photosynthesis.
Okay.
So,
how?
Cyanobacteria appeared a bit earlier than the 2 billion years ago when these reactions started. Cyanobacteria made oxygen. They increased the oxygen content of the atmosphere from less than 1% to more than 15%, which oxidized the uranium-235, made it soluble, and allowed the uranium to be concentrated enough in one spot to start the reactions. So without the birth of photosynthesis, these reactors would never have happened because the uranium was not soluble enough to be concentrated in one point.
Fascinating.
Which is pretty amazing science right there.
That is very cool. Thank you, photosynthesis.
Thank you, photosynthesis, for making nuclear reactions possible. Now, it is possible that other examples of natural fission reactions may be found elsewhere, but it's just amazing what can happen naturally without human intervention. And just bearing in mind that that doesn't necessarily make it safe. So these reactions were probably going on for 1 million years, 2 billion years ago, and that whole area must have been very unsafe while there was nuclear reactions happening all over the place, uncontrolled, just under the ground. And, luckily no one was around to be affected by it. But I guess 2 billion years is a good enough safety zone for nuclear fission technology. And that is all we have time for this week on Lost in Science. Thank you for joining us in Getting Lost. If you have any questions or suggestions for the team, get in touch with us by email. We are lostinsci@gmail.com. You can send cheap tweets to us at lostinscience1 on Twitter, or you can find us on the ubiquitous Facebook. Lost in Science is recorded at the studios of 3CR in Melbourne on the land of the Kulin Nation and is broadcast across Australia on the Community Radio Network with the assistance of the Community Broadcasting Foundation. You can find a podcast version of the show on 3cr.org.au, or you can tune in the way you did this week when we return in our usual time slot to get Lost in Science!
Thanks for listening to a 3CR podcast. 3CR is an independent community radio station based in Melbourne, Australia. We need your financial support to keep going. Go to www.3cr.org.au for more information and to donate online.